One.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our session, Agriculture, CAFOs, and Biogas Facilities in Rural Communities. We have a panel here of folks that are doing a lot of good work on the Eastern Shore and beyond, and we hope that you enjoy what we have to offer for you. So just want to start off by letting everybody kind of introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their backgrounds before we get started here. I'm Michael Payan. I am the co-founder of Sentinels of Eastern Shore Health and Sussex Health and Environmental Network, and I will pass it off to Chris Heaney.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Heaney. I'm an associate professor of environmental health and engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in Baltimore. Great to be here.
Imani?
Hello, everyone. I am Imani Dolival. I am the founder and CEO of IFATA Medical Care Services. We are a family practice located in Seaford, Delaware, and also in Wacomico County in Salisbury, Maryland, practicing family medicine.
Sharita?
Hi, I am Charito Calvacho Mateico. I reside in Newark, Delaware, and I am the chair of the Votamos We Vote Coalition, and I am also the founder of the Latino Initiative on Restorative Justice.
Thank you. Danny?
Hi, my name's Danielle Diamond, and I'm an attorney, and I've spent many years working at the very local level dealing with agricultural related pollution and grassroots community organizing.
And Maria?
Hi, I am Maria Payan. I am co-founder of Sentinels of Eastern Shore Health, which is the lower Eastern Shore of Maryland, and Sussex Health and Environmental Network, which is in Delaware. We advocate for a fair food system that is just to everyone. We have worked on the Delmarva Peninsula and beyond for a long time, but we have a big concentration here with the poultry industry, where we're dealing with CAFOs, which is AKA factory farms or concentrated animal feeding operations, and a lot of the infrastructure that goes with it, which could be anaerobic digesters, a lot of health problems, contamination, and we work in a lot of communities where there's an intersection of environmental injustice, where we have people who may not have clean water or clean air. And we're going to dig into a little bit of that today.
And I know a couple of folks here have some presentations that we're going to end up running through. Before we dive into that, I just want to set the tone here by maybe we can each give just a brief overview of some of the environmental health concerns that we've seen related to both CAFOs and biogas related to the Eastern Shore. Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Well, I guess to start with, and I think there's experts here that know more than I do, but one thing that we do know, and that's science has already shown, is that large-scale industrial livestock feeding operations have significant public health, environmental, and social and quality of life impacts on surrounding communities, and they're significant. And along with that comes a lack of laws and regulations to address it. And we know these facilities are commonly sited in low income and communities of color in a disproportionate way to other areas.
Dr. Heaney, maybe do you want to jump into your slide, because it seems like that's going to address some of that, and then we'll maybe start into Charitas and a little discussion.
I think we have you on mute, Dr. Heaney.
That would be fine with me. I'm fine going into the slides, but if we have any other overview across the panel discussion, I'm happy to do that too.
Okay.
I think I can briefly bring a different perspective. As a clinician, I used to hear the statement, your zip code will determine the outcome or the quality of education your children will have. But living in Eastern Shore and practicing in Sussex County in Wacomoco County really bring me firsthand your zip code will determine your quality of life and also your quality of health pretty much. And those two, the Eastern Shore area in general, the HEPSA score for primary care is 16, mental health 16, and the disparity that we experience there is huge, not only in having access to health care, and also the quality of life, the people living there. I serve a huge migrant community, and I can say 80% of my patients they work in the poultry plant industry, and where they live, they exposed to biogas. Where they work, it's on a daily basis. They're exposed to chemicals. And what I noticed I always check their nails inside their nose doing a physical exam. They all have what we call um, erythematous and swollen nasal turbinates. Inside their nose, it's swollen and red. And that's a common thing among all of my patients. Some are symptomatic, some are not for now. And I always ask myself, what's the how it's going to be 5 years or 10 years from now? And them being exposed to chemicals on a daily basis and live in an environment where the air is polluted, it's what we call environmental injustice in a simple word.
Thank you for sharing, Amani. Sharita, do you have some words to offer?
You know, in this scenario, adding to what Imani have mentioned, it's important to know a very good number of the people affected are Latinos. And Latinos immigrants, not just any Latino immigrants. And when you talk about Latinos and Haitians coming to this area and living in this area, an important factor you cannot forget, you cannot dismiss these people, even if they will know their lives are threatened, at the same time, they are afraid to speak up because the nature of their immigration status is of trauma, is of being afraid constantly. So I think if we don't see this component, then our audience will be missing that important reality and the context in which these things are occurring.
Thank you. Chris, if you want to, give a brief overview and jump right into your slides.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just add that in addition to what we heard from Dr. From Emily Dorival and Shrito, is that, we know that there's many adverse environmental health and health outcomes and states of health and well-being that are related to these facilities. From antimicrobial resistance, epidemic and pandemic strains and clones of bacteria and viruses, the plumes of air pollutants which disseminate throughout neighborhoods and communities, adversely affecting lung function, metrics of stress, affecting daily activities of living and quality of life, increased blood pressure. All of these things have been demonstrated. I think one of the things that transitions nicely into this topic is, what are the data with the new technologies being proposed around biogas, and whether or not this is truly going to result in any changes of what we already can say are the adverse health implications of these kinds of vertically integrated and structured industrial scale facilities. So I'm going to try to share screen and This is my first time here, so I'm going to try to get this going as smooth as possible. Let me know if you can see the slides in presenter mode now.
Not yet.
Okay, hang on. So, I'll just share my whole screen. All right, now can you see?
No.
Hang on.
Michael, can you share either? I think you might have to share if you're moderator.
Okay. Let me.
Let's.
Hang on.
Sorry.
Present, share screen.
Mm-hmm.
Share screen. Let's
Present.
see. Window, and then I'll select the PowerPoint and share. Are you seeing anything?
No.
Not yet.
Hang on, maybe we'll get technical assistance here. I'll do a little bit of setup while we're waiting. Hang on. So the idea is that, you know, there's new technologies being put forward. Biofuels, biogas, industrial food animal production, waste to energy, right? All of these are these technologies which have been around and well recognized as early as some of the agreements in a state where I grew up in North Carolina. There was the Smithfield Agreement. And a lot of these, what was termed as environmentally superior technologies, were known about in the late 90s and put forward as a part of an agreement called the Smithfield Agreement, where you could try to engage and apply technologies to these operations in a way that could digest the waste and harvest gases which can be utilized for combustion. So gases like methane recovery and capture. And it wasn't until recently when there was a lot of interest in actually, trying to adopt many of these technologies. And now we're at a point where many of these technologies are being put forward with a lot of arguments about that they're clean, they're a part of a climate solution effort, that they have economic benefits, that they're generally safe, and that in some manner they might address many of the potential concerns with these vertically integrated corporate facilities. However, I believe, and this is the central hypothesis that and the research question that we're going after is, how many people are stopping to ask benefits for whom? And is this something that is potentially going to economically benefit the transnational corporations and repeat a pattern of environmental health damages and public health damages among communities and neighbors at the fence line of these facilities? And when you stop and think and ask yourself what data actually exists outside of data in terms of the cost benefit economic analysis of the capital required to construct and implement these new technologies, and then calculate a potential return on investment in terms of energy unit that can be sold out of these facilities, how much of that economic analysis is being performed with a public health perspective in mind, with an environmental health perspective in mind, versus an agroeconomic perspective? And that's something that is really critical and that we have been trying to focus in on and partner with community organizations like Maria and Michael from SESH and Chen. And in North Carolina, we partner with Mr. Devon Hall and the Rural Empowerment Association for Community Health. And so we have been painstakingly working to collect data to address these questions of environmental impacts for whom, potential public health implications for whom, economic benefits for whom or lack thereof. And so I'll pause there, Michael, and maybe somebody could work offline with me from the committee, the Siege committee staff, to try to get the slides presented. But that's the general idea that I think I'm prepared to address and provide some data to. Oh, great.
It's
Looks like we have the slides. Okay, wonderful. So are these being shared?
It looks like it.
Okay, if somebody could make them full screen, that would be great. Perfect, Shawnees. Thank you, thank you. Oh, this is from my computer. Okay, great. Oh, wonderful. That is good to know. All right, so can everybody see it now?
Yes.
Very well. Thank you.
Wonderful.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so here, so this is our group. We just are launching an initiative called Community Science and Innovation for Environmental Justice, or CSI. EJ, it's intentionally sort of because we adopt some of the kind of forensic science technologies, but we want to bring them to bear for community fence line neighbors. And so Chris Spicer is a big driver of this. Many of you know Chris on the community partner side. He's the research program manager. Kathleen Kurowski is a PhD student. She's a big driver of this work too. And so we've been launching into this community-driven partnership around, here is some of the material that's publicly facing from this case, Align RNG, the website here. Harness the clean, renewable energy from our nation's hog farms for the good of the climate, consumers, and family farmers. And many people have raised questions, many reporters, great investigators, asking, is this equitable for whom? And what data exist in response to these questions about climate, health, economic, and environmental justice impacts of these biofuel infrastructure projects, which are really large scale. There is a scale at which these new technologies are being proposed to be implemented, which is just, quite incredible. And really, the question is, from a lot of these materials, is who's stopping it, ask benefits for whom, and would there be a pattern that could potentially be repeated in terms of the environmental injustice of the location of these permitted industrial factory farms, swine CAFOs, poultry CAFOs, and other types of CAFOs, when you have additional capital at a large scale being invested in that mode of production. Okay, so this works in the Delmarva by taking chicken litter and waste, collecting it in facilities anaerobic digestion. AD, maybe an acronym you might have heard a fair amount, but large scale concentration of the wastes from the poultry facilities in order to harvest gas, that is methane, which is a combustible gas, which is a part of, you might hear, clean burning fuel in many buses, and other infrastructure that demands that kind of energy, and also the idea that there could be a rich compost that could come out of it. In North Carolina, it's a little bit different. More predominantly, it's the swine CAFOs, which have liquid waste management systems where you're capturing methane from liquid open cesspools the size of football fields, and you're capping them in an effort to try to capture methane, which you can convert into a purified form storage, store in tanks like these facilities here in the middle. And this could potentially be piped, connecting into existing and proposed pipelines across the country. So we're trying to get at these different kinds of facilities, traditional swine CAFOs, poultry CAFOs, and also these newly proposed anaerobic digesters and capped facilities, and try to get data, try to see what it looks like. So we're doing fence line forensics and community science and trying to do ground truthing with stationary air monitors that measure particulate matter of different sizes, gases, get meteorological data, also looking at black carbon. And on the right, we're trying to get, with our community partners, a process where we can put visible eyes. We used to try to do where community partners would have residents who live in the community, would be driving and have a diary and try to take notes of whenever they see spraying, or where they see clean out of barns with chicken litter or poultry litter. But here we're trying to come up with a way to make this a little bit more automated and actually use machine learning algorithms to be able to record, to identify and record these patterns, which then we can relate back to air pollutant elevations and spikes. And so this is what people in rural communities like North Carolina live with. Illegal spraying, they'll try to capture with picture taking. A river and water keepers took this picture in North Carolina. Active rain event, spraying in the rain, and Clearly, these facilities, in terms of the neighbors, representing a nuisance here from everything from the drift of the air pollutants to the kinds of dead boxes that you see here in the foreground. So we're visually trying to observe these with trail cameras to catch events like this of spraying that we can potentially relate to the air pollutant profiles. And so these multi-air pollutant profiles, we're measuring particulate matter and gases, and some of the key gases that we're measuring with community partners like Marie and Michael on the Eastern Shore and in North Carolina are achieved through hooking up big, large vehicles with these instruments called by the company called Picaro. They measure ammonia, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and methane at every second intervals. And you could link up those data at the second level with, if you're a runner, a biker, or any enthusiast that involves Strava, which is sort of tracking your exercise activities. We can actually geocoordinate, timestamp link with geocoordinates of the mobile routes. And then we can get the point where we can look at variability in those air pollutants at a 1-second resolution and try to identify whether there are hotspots or not. So we also have a GoPro, which we hook up to the car to be able to catch what's going on. And we can link that down to try to help Beck get a sort of a look at what's going on from a timestamp record for visual observations. Okay, here's the Picaro. These are powered by these kind of big glamping batteries that you have to put in that could give us about 4 to 5 hours in the car. We can do a morning run and an evening run. And so this is something that with these gases, we're measuring nuisance, malodor, health gases. Michael, what you asked about at the beginning, what do we know about the health implications? Hydrogen sulfide has been related to adverse malodor events, which affect the health and quality of life of neighbors of these facilities. Ammonia, also in this category. Also, physiologic alteration of hydrogen sulfide levels have been associated with alterations in lung function among neighbors of swine CAFOs in North Carolina. So the greenhouse gases are methane and carbon dioxide. These are a key feature of climate change and climate variability, and are being proposed as a potential source from these facilities in terms of methane. But that's something that we want to investigate in terms of the ambient plumes. So preliminary results, we did air monitoring since about the fall, since about this time of last year. We've completed 30 trips in the morning and 23 trips in the evening in North Carolina and on the Delmarva Eastern Shore, and a range of facilities from traditional hog CAFOs, poultry CAFOs without any biogas facility, and then also all kinds of different presentations of biofuels and biogas facility. Composting facilities, like one in Delmarva that is proposed to become expanded with an anaerobic digestion technology on site. And also, we made some monitoring trips around existing large-scale anaerobic digesters, which are located in more urban areas, like in Jessup, Maryland. I'll present some data on that. So, just to give you some information in Delmarva, we did one mobile monitoring trip in August of this year, and here this is proximal to an anaerobic digestion facility on the Eastern Shore in Delaware, and what you see is these pretty substantial peaks of ammonia, up to 600 parts per billion of ammonia each time we pass by this large-scale anaerobic digestion facility in Seaford, Delaware. You also see a little bit contemporaneously, you see some elevations in methane, but really what is notable is the ammonia that is detectable each time we pass this facility. This is a facility where we see this ammonia plume, and I believe there's also discussions about expansion of this. And as is the case in North Carolina, whenever there are discussions with policymakers between industries who are proposing this technology be adopted, some of these facilities become sort of the apex example for tours. And so this is something that we're also trying to, with our community partners, get that information so that we can start to make measurements around them to get data that could indicate the lived experiences of what people who neighbor these facilities are dealing with. Shifting over to North Carolina, some quick examples. This is methane concentrations here, and I'm going to show you this little blip over here. Actually, it's not a little blip. It's quite a sizable increase in methane, and it's proximal to a swine CAFO biodigester and gas storage facility. So they have infrastructure that has gas tanks where these the methane and the other complex mixture of malodorant gases are conveyed into these large tanks that are stored, and you see a methane spike here up to 8 parts per million. Quite high spike in methane levels at a facility that is designed to retain and enclose and store methane. And this is something that is quite important for us to be able to understand with data and get at questions of the potential for this concentrated technology to potentially leak. We look at hydrogen sulfide in Duplin County as well. This is in October of 2022. Same facility, hydrogen sulfide levels elevated to the highest concentrations that we've seen, 238 parts per billion. And I'll come back to the context for that in a little bit. And then finally, here, ammonia levels. And we see that ammonia has a little bit of a different pattern spatially in North Carolina, but we do see high levels of ammonia in the morning run up to 104 parts per billion. So we can put these data at incredible time resolution on the x-axis, and you can see spikes and the concordance of these spikes in these climate gases, methane, whether or not there's some slight increase in hydrogen sulfide and ammonia as we're passing by partially capped swine CAFO lagoons and uncapped swine CAFO lagoons. We can compare the concentrations of these facilities that do not yet have this technology and facilities where they have adopted this kind of technology in order to get at some of the community questions. So this is something that's we feel is really critical. And just to give something in terms of a little bit more context, I'm actually going to advance here. This red spike is the methane and hydrogen sulfide concentration that we observed proximal to that swine CAFO biogas storage facility in North Carolina. This more than doubles the highest measured concentration of hydrogen sulfide in all of the previous longitudinal health studies and epidemiologic studies that Steve Wing completed in the 2000s to the middle 2010s, where they were measuring hydrogen sulfide in the context of the health panel study, which demonstrated adverse impacts on respiratory health. Impacts of malodor on health-related quality of life, and the highest level they measure was 90 parts per billion. We're seeing 238 parts per billion at one of these sites where the infrastructure of biogas is being implemented. The Iowa groups who had done an ambient monitoring on site of swine CAFOs in Iowa had measured 39 parts per billion as their highest sulfide concentration. So this is something I think we all need to be communicating around, because I think a lot of these policy decisions are being made in the absence of data, where the information that is available to the community partners and policy experts and legal experts is essentially lacking data. Just one more interesting thing, we have the Bioenergy Devco composting facility in Seaford, Delaware. Again, you see this ammonia level from another time that we visited it up to 300 parts per billion here. And then here at Jessup, Maryland, at an anaerobic digestion facility, it is an example of what is being proposed on the Eastern Shore. When we pass by each lap that we do past this anaerobic digestion facility, you see elevations of methane up to 8 parts per million and elevations in ammonia and hydrogen sulfide. So that's something that is as we wonder, and as policymakers are considering approving permits for facilities that are of the scale of anaerobic digestion facilities that already exist in Maryland and in the region, what can be expected in terms of the escape of climate gases and the offsite migration of health relevant gases. So that's something that we think is really important. One other thing that I'll mention that we're doing that has really been critical as neighborhood residents have tried to team up with lawyers to try to seek relief is measuring fecal microbial source tracking markers that are unique to animals that are being produced in these facilities. One of them is pig two-back, and we're working with PhD candidate Katie Karowski to evaluate and stand up poultry-specific fecal source tracking markers. And so these are incredibly powerful. I just want to give you an example, because you can actually, if there's a permit system, which potentially, as it does in North Carolina, defines swine CAFO liquid waste management systems as non-discharge, then it becomes important if we can detect swine-specific fecal material off-site of these permitted fields, which are permitted as non-discharge. So we have already detected pig twoback as a specific DNA source tracking marker of swine fecal pollution in surface waters off-site. And we've also now been able to demonstrate that we can detect pig twoback migrating off-site onto people's homes. These are from Q-tip swabs of settled surface dust on indoor and outdoor surfaces in people's homes. And we see high concentrations of pig twoback detected, and that those concentrations decline as people live farther away from the nearest swine CAFO in North Carolina. So, excuse me, these are two examples of technologies that we can bring to bear, and I'll pause there.
So I want to add real quickly, because this is a specific issue we've been addressing here in Seaford, Delaware. There was a proposal that was put in, and actually permits were put in to site a large-scale anaerobic digester in an agricultural residential zone next to communities. The closest two communities are linguistically isolated. English as a second language, Haitian Creole, and English as a second language, Latinx. The communities had requested meetings with the environmental agency to ask questions. A Title VI civil rights complaint, administrative complaint, was filed. We got news last week that the permits were approved by DENREC, who is our state environmental agency in Delaware. But we also got news that EPA has decided to open and investigate our complaint with DENREC, where communities were not publicly noticed and not able to meaningfully participate. I will say that the communities throughout the state of Delaware rallied against the injustice, and there were hundreds of comments in opposition to the facility. And from there, I would like to let anyone, you want to jump in a little bit?
Yeah, I want to put a fine point on what has already been said. I've had the privilege of working not only at the local level with Maria and Michael and the team here and looking at these issues, but what I want to say is that what we see here on the Eastern Shore, we see nationally. And I think that's what the work that's going on here is so vitally important, because it can be used elsewhere. If you look under the hood of a lot of the research that's out there that says biogas facilities are sustainable and they're an answer to these waste problems and whatnot, those are predominantly funded, if you trace the money, by the agribusiness industries that are going to benefit from those the installation of those technologies. What we need more of, which is what Dr. Heaney and Dr. Wilson and all of the community-based partners here, is the actual research that we need that actually shows the reality of what's happening on the ground. And that's so important, because one of the biggest issues that I feel we run into in trying to advocate for better laws and policies to regulate these things and to protect communities often don't have the data that they need to make that proof convincing enough for elected officials to run with. And so there's a great need for it. And I also want to point out one thing, which we can touch on later, is that in my experience, most of the environmental justice movement and environmental community that's trying to address these issues often look at how laws, rules, regulations are there to help correct these problems. Not many have looked at how they actually perpetuate and incentivize these problems. And I can speak more about that later, but I just want to flag that as something that I think is really important to look at.
I want Monty to say a couple words. She was honored this year with a very prestigious award that I would like her to explain. Um, and then after that, I would like to go to Charito, who has prepared a PowerPoint with that. You want to talk a little bit, Amani, about the award and about your concerns with,
The award was a surprise. I was nominated as a clinician serving the migrant community in Delmarva area, and the pretty much be able to open two practice in less than three years. Continue serving the community um, as a solo practitioner. I opened the first practice back in 2019. Um, Pretty much used my own money to open, and also I had to work without pay for 2 years because the need was too great for me to turn away. I left California accepting that position as a bilingual provider because there are a lot of Haitians living in the area, working in the poultry plant industry, and where the working condition is deplorable, to say the least. And when I see that they didn't have a voice and there was no one um, was willing to stand for them, and they will have many complaints of back injury, um, complaints of asthma, complaints of working in very poor condition, having recurrent pneumonia. So I was their voice. Pretty much, I felt like God placed me there. And although I experienced my own disparity, as far as having access of the healthcare that I needed for my own child, but I could not leave, and I am more committed being involved with Maria and having the knowledge of the environmental injustice that they're suffering from right now. Um, it's I can't turn away. The community that I serve, again, they are Haitian, Hispanic, um, migrant uh, communities where they work in hazardous environment, exposed to these bio or gas that Dr. Henny just explained, and that pretty much explain why they have rhinitis. The condition inside their nose explain why why it's like that, because they have daily exposure to these gas, ammonia, carbon dioxide, methane. So all these explains their health condition. Asthma is very high in that community. So it's not just, we're not just talking about data. We live in it. We seeing it on a daily basis. And these people, they face the situation where they have to work in this condition to make a living. They don't have any other choices. So how can we bring change where they can work in a safer environment, be able to provide for their family, at the same time give them possibility to improve their health conditions? These are the situations that we face, and we cannot turn a blind eye and pretty much ignore that it does not exist. And having another plant coming to the area where they work, they having direct exposure, and where they live, they're gonna have higher exposure. So there's no way around it. They going to be in a very injustice environment. Injustice will be what they live day by day. So it is our responsibility to bring change that could improve their health condition.
Imani, you know, why do you, the whole process of this facility trying to be sited in your neighborhood, I just want you to speak a little bit to that, maybe the lack of transparency that was evident throughout the process, and kind of why you think that your community was the proposed site for this facility.
First of all, the safety hazard that was posted on the website, it was in English. Okay, I remember they came to actually our church, explaining that it's gonna be translated, it's gonna be in different languages, Creole, Spanish, but that was not so. Um, and these Haitians or Hispanic communities, they're not fluent in English, okay? Whatever safety precaution that is being published, they don't have access to it. They cannot protect themselves. So pretty much they just there having hazardous chemical bringing to their environment, and power, feeling powerless, being powerless, and cannot do anything about it, because the people bringing these plants, the economic benefit it's going to bring to the people bringing the plants, and they have bigger voices than those communities.
Thank you, Imani. Um, Before we get into Sharita's presentation, I do want to give Danny and Maria the opportunity to comment on this as much as possible, because I think Sharita's is looking at this from a bit of a higher level. So any more to say in terms of biogas and in Seaford, or the CAFOs issues that we see in Delmarva?
So I'm going to weigh in a little bit. I am certain that we need the data. The data is what is going to be important for changing policy, for people understanding even why they're impacted. And I noticed that, when all that happened with Mount Air and all, it was birth defects, and talking to people over and over again, like they did not understand the connection until they started seeing the levels that they were being exposed to, that were overages in the permit, and the data on health. If you have high nitrates in your water, what does that do health-wise? If you are breathing air that has high levels of ammonia, what are the effects of that health-wise? So the data is so important that we are so thrilled to be have the opportunity to be partnering with Dr. Haney and his incredible team and gathering this, because let's face it, you have a lot of money and power behind industry's message, and we need the data in order to change it. And what's available today was not available 20 years ago. We have the ability now to do it. So I just want to add that before Charita does hers.
And yeah, I would love to jump in on that, and something Imani mentioned earlier, which was it's very difficult for people to navigate these systems where you actually can have a voice in what's going on in your community at the local, state, and federal level. And it is the people that are most directly impacted by these problems that do have the strongest voices, because most of the decision makers that we have out there making decisions about these very important issues don't have a clue on what's happening at the very local level. And so the importance of having systems and procedures that really allows the engagement of local community members that are being directly affected, I can't stress the importance of that enough. And that, coupled with the research that's going on, I believe that is a pathway to change, but we do have a lot of work to do to get there in terms of actually impacting policy because of the way our legal system is structured right now. but there's answers to that. So hopefully we'll talk about those later.
We'll hop into Sharita's presentation then. Let me just pull it up on the screen here and let Sharita share a piece as well.
Thank you. While you are so kind to put the technology on this, my PowerPoint, I just want to say how important it is to pair these two, the way how this team have been doing it. One thing is the data, so important, as Maria Payan said. And then the other is what we have been doing, and also sitting with the community, meeting with the community, developing and identifying leaders among the community in order to be able to let them know. Because when a woman that we know in this neighborhood or close to the biogas plant in the future, she took her child with respiratory illness for a week in the hospital. And she doesn't connect the data that is absent in her knowledge. That is the cause of the sickness from this little one. And that is what we need to always be doing one thing and the other. And we have to do it to understand that that's the way to have an impact. The knowledge obtained by science and data in the understanding of a community that lacks the connection with the language and the culture and the information. So I guess so kind
We are just having a little bit of trouble getting this up on the screen here. We'll try resharing, see if we can get this up.
do you think I can try from my end? I have literally this experience in that. Latinos in Haitians who are Latinos, because all of them in all the Caribbean is part of the geographic area with Mexico in North America, Central America, and South America, is what we consider to be Latin America. So Latinos and or Hispanics, however they choose to be called, or people call them, are the people affected in Delaware, from different countries. But there is now an amazing presence of Haitians. And the reason is that with the new law of Biden and immigration, there is the possibility of 30,000 people from Haiti and other countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, maybe one. Those countries can send 30,000 citizens a month. However, they require to have a sponsor. And something that we all need to be aware that is happening is that the poultry industry employers have become their sponsors. And that, yes, bring them in an airplane, but then they are requiring payment, just like the coyote. So they won't cross the border for the treasure journey that they have to end in the Darien area where, there is mud and everybody risks their lives. They come in airplane, paid by the sponsors, but then the sponsors, the poultry industry employers, are requesting from them thousands of dollars to be paid. And that also means that they hold their papers, and that, practically puts them completely in the hands of their employers. That is a phenomenon that is happening, and that's terrible that is happening. So now not only that the poultry industry exploit their labor force, but now they have a stronger position in the lives of the workers from Haitian. And that's why the rumors is that Latinos are saying we are going to be replaced. We are not going to be there. In my presentation, what I was trying to portray is that we are not people that just came in the last decades to United States. It's so incredible how much we have been the fabric of the history of this country, even in ways that is disproportionate completely to the knowledge that we have about what Latinos have done. And yes, miracle happened. Thank you so much. And Mike is just amazing in this with his support. So if we go to the next one. So we have been here in all these countries, really, really for so long. And I'm going to give you a brief idea of what I mean with this. So in the next slide, we'll see that the presence of what we call Latinos, which is the blending of the Spaniards, Europeans with Native people, is what created the Latino. I'm showing you San Agustin, Florida, founded in 1565 by Spaniards, where there was already Africans that came into the foundation of that. 50 years early that what the project 1619 is mentioned. So those 50 years cannot be forgotten. It also created a different type of slavery. So, but it's where in Spanish, and if you click one more time, Mike, yeah, se habla español from the very beginning. So when so many people are saying, speak Spanish, well, we should all be speaking Spanish because that was the first European language that was spoken in what is now United States of America. In the next one, I would like to show them how big was the colonies of Spain. With what purpose? If you click next, Mike, you'll see that there is a monument in which it's almost the only one in the United States that recognized the effort that the Spaniard governor did in the Revolutionary War in every sort. But the last sentence of this says, quote, it is little understood that Spain underwrote 80% of the war's cost. What does it mean? All the colonies from the top to the bottom that you see in red in Latin America, in North, Central, and South America, provided a tax, and also in church provided a little bit for the Revolutionary War. We made America happen with 80% of the war cost. So remember that when you are saying and when you are hearing other people saying they are just coming here. No, we helped the history in the making of what it is now, America. And that's why, Mike, in the next, you'll see that this is the peso, and the person that had to put the counting books was always put in those Herculean columns, and if you click, what he was doing was putting these Herculean columns with also the material that was waving among them. And this is how the dollar sign became. That's the history, is the presence of what we call now Latinos. And then if you move forward into 1848, and I put again that map that reminds you the colony of Spain where there was already what we call Latinos now, 55% of Mexico became United States. And you can see all the difference: Nevada, California, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, and parts of other states. We were here before. Thank you. And the next one, briefly, is when we move forward to the last century, the presence of braceros. It was a law created to bring them to work here. And half of the wages were going to be received here and half in either Puerto Rico or Mexico. So many of them never got paid. If you keep clicking, Mike, you'll see they left all their families, their hard work. And if you see this one, they were put DDT when they were crossing the border. That is the humiliation they all received, and even worse things that you can read in books that they did to them to clean it. And then the last click that you can do in this is that they always had this dignity of music and culture, not only working but also adding to their hard labor. So in the next, and we're going to go very briefly, I don't want to take too much. Construction workers is an incredible boom where Latino presence is, and they are the ones exposed to the environment, the ones that don't have those breaks to drink or protect themselves under shade. The next one, you can see the presence of Latinos. So we are more or less 50.5 million people and represent the 60.3. And see in this next one that says 1 in every 4 children, 1 in every 6 individuals are Latinos. 56% of the population grow from 20,000 to 2010. And now we are in 2023. Imagine the growth. We represent 1 trillion. At that time that this was done in 2020, in buying power was, of course, that had been even more significant in the last decade. And the majority are Mexicans, then all the other nationalities. And the next one shows how Latinos were the first ones exposed as essential workers, the first one to die, the first one to be exposed to COVID, the first ones to contaminate their families. Next. But they were not, and we are not silent. We are always organized. And it is very important that what I see of the movements of Latinos is that they don't even want to deal with NGOs. They want to deal as a movement, building from the grassroots, from the bottom up, because sometimes NGOs are also paid to do just certain incremental things, even with good intentions, and we will still miss what we need. Next. You can see farm workers also are defended by farm workers. Next. And you can see in this the growth of Latinos labor force is so evident. It's going up and up. Next. And I wanted to give you the taste of what it is to go through the Darien area of Panama map. And they are like warriors going through this space where many people used them and attacked them. Look, they have to carry their own water to survive. And still smiling faces with the hope to make it. Next. And many of them have been brought to New York. This is one example. See their faces, their hopes. They are ready to work and contribute to this community. Next. And again, going back to the global warming in the fields, they are the first exposed. And some articles have been written about how, the heat damaged the liver and there is no way back after that. Death follows. What they want is breaks. What they want is a little bit of water. Now, this is another thing that I want to do very brief, but it shows Another thing that we are exposed is by corporations that want us to buy, not only make the worst chicken possible, but also they want us to eat it happily. Next, there is millions put in a Latino market, more than 700, I think 780 million put to convince Latinos to buy junk food. And the consequences are terrible. 40% of our children are obese and develop other illnesses. Next. Yes, so this is the future if we don't stop it. But they are there. Cosecha movement is a movement of immigrants. We need to follow them. We need to listen what they want to say. They are organized and they meet what they said. Is that the last one? Or maybe there is another one. And one beautiful example of organizers in Pennsylvania is that they are getting driver's license for the Latino population. So I think that is the last slide, but I want to say something. In our fight to better the lives of Latinos, immigration reform is important, but we cannot be one group issue. It's not the only thing that we need to do, because let's imagine for a moment, if immigrants get citizenship, a path to citizenship, DACA, in fact, receive citizenship, they will be in an America without Medicare for all, without fair wages, without fair housing, without free education. If the LGBT community get all their rights, no, it's the same story. If we have all the voting rights, we still don't have Medicare for all, fair wages, fair housing. That is the vision of restorative justice. That is a paradigm of peace and human needs. And there is all these human needs that need to be met before we will live in a totally peaceful society. And that is the perspective in which we need to see Latinos being affected terribly by the poultry industry. And I agree completely in saying it should not be the way, and worse, the only way to feed the population, because this is insane and benefit just few and detriment of so many of us.
Thank you for that, Sharita. So I just want to move briefly before we finish up here. Is there any final thoughts, again, on agriculture, CAFOs, and biogas facilities in rural communities from our panel?
I want to say something to what Charitos mentioned about the Haitians coming and they are replacing the Hispanic community in the plant industry. The same way you demonstrated clearly that the Latinos, they are the pioneer in the workforce. Um, the Haitians also participated in the Revolutionary War. That's why you have Louisiana, they have the Creole taste, and New Orleans, that's the, I would say, the point. And the injustice is to the entire continent. We are all Americans. Whether we came from Haiti, we are still in America. We came Mexico, we are still in America. Panama, this is a continent. The issue, these people leaving their home country because of the a global injustice to all of these poor countries. This is not just, it is a greater scale. They don't want to leave their home.
Yeah.
The Haitians don't want to leave. They are leaving because of the living condition. And I don't want to bring it to another level. But what I want to say, when they give them access to come, because they dying every day, dying the same way you show that they coming walking, okay, from Brazil to Texas. It's because of the living condition, and our government pretty much putting billions in war in other continents and not addressing what's going on in our continent, which is America.
I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. And I just want to put a fine point on what both Amani and Charita were saying. I really appreciated the history that you guys have talked about, because that's the reality. And it often seems like there's a lot of political rhetoric and whatnot to sort of skew the reality that this is your home. These are homes of all different kinds of people from across continents. And we shouldn't ignore that, number one. But it's very, I think you can analyze that with the way that the agribusiness industry is framing biogas and in promoting industrial agriculture. There's a rhetoric that's going around, and the reality isn't being presented accurately. And one thing I think that people need to be very aware of, and that I hope we continue to talk about, is how our laws, rules, regulations have been essentially written by the industries that are benefiting from those laws, rules, and regulations. And so it's even our courts are beholden to these regulatory systems, and that is something that we really need to look at, because what we have right now is a country that is perpetuating the very injustices that we are trying to address.
And Dr. Heaney, final word before our session?
Yeah, I think that one thing that is important to consider and to always come back to is, when you read in the newspaper, or if you go to a public meeting, or these new biofuels technologies are being debated, I think the core question is benefits for whom?
Right.
And something that I think is really critical is that over the past decades, the environmental injustices that neighbors of IFAP and CAFOs have faced, have they ever included a concern in flood zones, in hurricane zones, that there could be now a concentration of infrastructure that involves materials which could potentially, by their very nature, be explosive? And that is something that I don't believe is getting a lot of attention. And I think we can talk about doing health studies and exposure studies of the presence of these kinds of gases that could represent a nuisance, health impacts. But I think, as the scale of what's being proposed starts happening, and people reporting it of, the trees were cleared in my backyard and now I see massive tanks and what's in them. And then I think we maybe know enough to collectively pose the question, what happens to those tanks and facilities and pipelines when the next hurricane or massive storm comes along? And what is the assurance of the safety of the communities who are living now in these spaces where this new kind of technological solution is being proposed? And as we grapple with that question, we think about, what are the needs for people who are going to be taking on potentially these additional risks to their health, to their safety? So that's something that I think is not discussed very often, and is an important area.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, over and over again, we keep seeing, we saw it in Salisbury, right? Often it's a story that is what I call half truths, half sentences. The folks trying to put in projects that are going to, let's face it, economically really benefit this industry, as well as the folks that are, venture capitalists. But we need to think, We were sold that this was going to be a solution for environmental justice communities, that this was going to take broiler litter that was running off of our fields into our waterways and degrading water quality, and this is going to clean up everything. The reality is that in this project, 88% of this waste is DAF, dissolved air flotation, which is poultry processing plant waste. Okay, it's coming in from 4 states, 4 different states, to this little community in Delaware, in Seaford, Delaware, in a residential, agriculturally zoned area. And there is a land application process of a byproduct that is created. Again, very common sense. If Delaware is number one, 97.5% of our waterways are contaminated, 100% of our estuaries are contaminated. If we cannot manage our own waste, why on God's green good earth are we bringing waste from 4 states that has a byproduct? Where is that byproduct going to go? Everybody knows it lives close to it because we know where the excess goes now, the closest fields, right? This is not well thought out. There have been no public health studies, no health impact assessment. Our families, our communities, we love our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors. And this is unacceptable. And we thank the EPA for opening this complaint.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate it. And lunchtime session will be starting in about 15 minutes here.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks all. Take care.
you.
all.